else, and then on a lower rung there's the feds. So on this higher level there's everyone, and then on a tier lower than that there are people who are employed by the federal government. I really don't like the feds. They're sort of a they're just bad, man. Like, how could you ever work for the federal government is really the question that needs to be asked. Like, how could you ever do that? How could you in good conscience work for them, knowing the atrocities which they commit, knowing all the different breaches of security and privacy which they commit? How could you do that? Well, James Comey is all too happy to work for the feds, unfortunately, and he's the head of the FBI. In fact, he's director of the FBI. And according to RT, the FBI chief is now pushing for encryption backdoors despite tech experts' opposition. Now, he may have good intentions, but you know what they say about those. And the problem with this is he doesn't seem to understand what is implied with backdoors in technology. Now, basically, what he's wanting is he's wanting to put an end to encryption that can't be broken by the government. Now, that might sound like a noble cause to you, but here's why it's not at all. It means that just because there's a backdoor for the government doesn't mean there's not a backdoor for everyone else. And surely they know that. This is a direct and deliberate weakening of security for the private sector. And the private sector really can use as much security as it possibly can get. Now, as of right now, I can encrypt my SD card from my phone, and it can only be accessed by me with a password of my choosing. Hopefully, it's a strong password. And that's fine. That should be the case. Now, the feds can actually get into that, whether I like it or not, they can. There's always some way to break encryption like that. It just takes a while. And with an NSA supercomputer, probably doesn't take any time at all. So it's not like it's really a huge deal for them. It's probably just an extra 5 minutes that they have to spend decrypting an SD card or USB flash drive or hard drive or what have you. So it's really not as big a deal as possibly they want you to think. But again, they want you to think that it's a giant big deal, and it's really just, it's not. It's not that big of a deal that people can have encryption. And yet people in the government don't seem to understand that people have a right to privacy. You actually do have a right to privacy. So how then can they come in and say, yeah, you know, your right to privacy, we respect that and everything, but we need to read what's on your SD card there. Like, well, okay, but what about my right to privacy? You have to get a warrant before you search anything. They're like, well, yeah, but you might be a terrorist. And that's all the warrant they need. You might be a terrorist is pretty much the best warrant you can ever get. If I break into your house and say I'm a federal agent, I break into your house with no warrant whatsoever, and I can just say, well, you know, you might be a terrorist. And then you're expected to sort of back down and say, oh, you know, you're right, I might be. I didn't even think of that. And you sit in your bathroom and wait for the investigation to be over. Encryption is a threat to public safety, says FBI Director get James Comey. He argued that before testifying at a Senate hearing. Crypto experts and the tech industry opposed demands by U.S. officials for backdoor keys to encrypted software, such as both harmful and impractical. In a guest post on Lawfare blog, FBI Director James Comey argued that to protect the public, the government sometimes needs to be able to see an individual's stuff, though only under appropriate circumstances and with appropriate oversight. Assuming that there's a warrant there, fine. But if you have a warrant, that's a whole other story. You see, it seems that Mr. Comey doesn't seem to understand that warrants are an actual thing and that the Fourth Amendment is a real and tangible right which we have. You have Fourth Amendment rights, whether the feds like it or not, you kind of do. So they need to have a warrant before they can search through your stuff, as he puts it. But he doesn't like that idea very much. Now, something that has to be understood as well is that encryption isn't just for people who want to hide stuff. Although maybe it is. Say, people all the time say, I have nothing to hide. Go ahead and search my stuff. Well, you might not know what you have to hide. That might be part of the problem. It's not just tangible objects in your car when we're talking about this sort of thing. It's not like, well, I don't have a machete covered in blood of all the people I killed in my serial murder spree. Go ahead and look in my car. It's not like that. And it's not like, well, you know, I just shot the president and I have my my 1890s Italian surplus rifle in the back of my car that I used to do that act. So, yeah, I don't want you to search my car. It's not a situation like that where you might be excused, although you're not. It's not a situation such as that one. No, it's, well, your encryption actually covers quite a few different things other than just files you might not want other people to know about. Encryption is keeping your financial information safe as well. Yeah. That's what we're talking about here, much more so than just I have files on my computer I don't want other people to know about. It's not like that. It's not to hide giant stores of child pornography or anything like that, although there may be applications for that. I'm sure there are actually, but very rare would be the occasion when that's used. And again, get a warrant. But when it comes to encryption, it covers so many things that most people don't even think about. Have you ever used a website and it said HTTPS in the top of your screen? You may have noticed that, you might not have. It's actually it's fine if you don't because you're not a web designer. I mean, why would you? But if you notice at any point, say you're using Amazon.com and you're making a purchase, and you may notice in the upper left-hand corner of your screen on the URL bar, is what it's called, it'll say HTTPS. Well, that means secure. That means there's a layer of encryption going on where there's actually a layer of encryption that your information goes through so that you can be reasonably assured that your purchases are made in a safe and secure way. Now, if there's a backdoor into that information, you no longer have the assurance that your purchases are being made in a safe and secure way if there's a backdoor. And it's not even just the feds who may have all the good intentions in the world who want to look through your information, but we can be reasonably assured that the feds don't have any interest in stealing your financial information, right? I mean, we can make that reasonable assumption that some guy in an FBI office doesn't really care about what your credit card number is. And yeah, you might be right about that. But other people, not so much. If we're talking about Russian hackers or hackers in Albania who are very much interested in your financial information, so they might sell it on deep web forums, I mean, that's a real thing. I have seen sites where that sort of thing goes on. I don't know if it's real or not, but I've certainly seen what appears to be a site where that sort of thing goes on. So it has to be, you have to keep in mind that there are people who want your financial information, whether you realize it or not, who are definitely not feds who have good intentions. There definitely are people who have very poor intentions and have no interest in keeping you safe whatsoever, who are all too happy that these backdoors are going to be put in place. That has to be kept in mind. While the feds may have all the good intentions in the world, that doesn't really amount to anything if the good intentions are going to lead to lots of theft in the cyber sector, which I hate to say, but it really is possible that that could happen. In fact, it's highly likely that that will happen. A reason being, sure, there's a back door that the feds can get into, but it's not just the feds, right? It's an unlocked back door, essentially, that anyone could walk in, and you're just sort of hoping on your good faith that only the feds are going to walk through. That's a very naive assumption, I hate to say. It's probably not going to be the case. Very rare will be the occasion where you'll see a Fed who cares anything at all about you. I mean, I hate to say it, but that's probably the case. And actually, that's probably a good thing. Chances are you're not like me, where you have some sort of outlet in which you can express yourself, right? Like radio is kind of an outlet where you can express yourself and you can talk about what you think about different things, which does, I don't want to say put you on a higher tier, because I don't think it does, but in their eyes, it may just. We're saying things that are actually kind of radical in a lot of ways. It may sound like just common sense, because it is, but common sense is the enemy of subversion and lies, really. So it's kind of a difficult situation for people who may work in the federal government who are trying to perpetrate different, less than truthful things over different information sources. So when anyone contradicts that, that becomes a very dangerous thing. So believe it or not, we might actually be kind of dangerous to some people. I don't mean to be. I don't want to be dangerous to anybody. I don't want to see anybody get hurt. But hey, I mean, it can happen, right? I mean, somebody getting hurt is the last thing I ever want to see. And somebody being upset is not something that I want to see. But it could happen. And if it does, hey, so be it. But that's something that has to be kept in mind. So people like me might very well be targeted. People like you might very well be targeted. Are you a homeschooled mother? You might be targeted. We don't know, because there's not any conclusive list of people who are targeted by the feds for investigation or who are put on some sort of watch list or do not fly list. I've never flown commercial, so I don't know if I'm on a do not fly list or not, but it might be. Who knows? There's no way to know. I can't even file a Freedom of Information Act request to find out if I'm on a no-fly list, because they won't give you that info. Well, anyway, encryption denies the government that ability to look through your stuff, and it will affect public safety, says Comey, citing the example of the Islamic State operators in Syria using encrypted chats to recruit dozens of troubled Americans to kill people, saying, "I really am not a maniac, or at least my family says so," says James Comey. "But my job is to try to keep people safe," he wrote, calling for a robust debate to resolve the conflict between privacy and security. Of course, we all know you should never sacrifice privacy in order to obtain security, because if you do so, you deserve neither. It's paraphrasing heavily Ben Franklin, but still, that is the case. If you're sacrificing your security or your privacy, I should say, in order to obtain security, you don't deserve either one. That's the simple fact of the matter. If you can keep yourself safe, hey, cool. And you actually can. That's the funny thing. It's actually kind of easy to keep yourself safe. Do you own a firearm? Do you know how to use it? Well, chances are you do. I mean, this is the South after all. You probably went deer hunting with your cousin or your uncle or your dad or your sister or your mother at some point, right? I mean, who hasn't? So you own a weapon and you probably know how to use it. That gives you a leg up on a lot of different people. And that means that you now suddenly have the ability to at least defend your home, and your household against any threat, foreign or domestic. Right now, you have that ability. Maybe you even have military training. Maybe you served in the armed forces. I don't know. It could be. So you have that leg up as well. So you have all you need at that point to protect yourself. You don't really need the Fed's help in that regard, do you? Well, he says, I really am not a maniac. So that kind of tells you something when somebody has to tell you that they're not a maniac, right? Like if I walked up to you and I said, hey, I'm not crazy, you probably would think that I am because, well, I am. But anyway, James Comey is scheduled to appear before the Senate Intelligence and Judiciary Committee. Actually, he was scheduled to do that Wednesday of this week, which I assume he already has, where he's expected to argue that commercial encryption is interfering with the Bureau's investigations of criminals and terrorists. Well, this begs the question, what are they going to do about that? I mean, there's encryption that's not on a commercial level. There's encryption that is maintained by the users. So how are they going to stop that from happening? Are they going to make that illegal for you to have a secure conversation? That tells you something, really, about the Huxleyan world in which we live, where nobody wants you to have any sort of secure communications. There needs to be somebody monitoring you. After all, you may be a terrorist. There's no way to tell. I might be a terrorist. You might be a terrorist. Your next door neighbor might be a terrorist. We need to make sure, right? You need to make sure. You might have a copy of the Turner Diaries on your coffee table, and every morning you read that and you think, man, this is an instruction manual, man. I need to pull this off. Who knows? You might be the next Timothy McVeigh. So if you are, we need to spy on your communications. Critics have blasted the government's anti-encryption campaign as dangerous and misguided, arguing that the FBI's own records, when actually kept and shown to the public, show that the Bureau has little trouble cracking the communications of terror suspects. So, given a warrant, they can get this information because guess what? The U.S. government's probably the best cracking house in the in the entire world, if not ever. And the United States government is a giant crack house. I say that because they're extremely good at cracking communications, cracking encryption. So really, this is just to make their job easier at this point. Given the large number of investigative tools available to the FBI, the notion that encryption imperils all law enforcement operations is ludicrous, said Patrick Eddington of the Cato Institute in a newspaper, the Hill newspaper, I should say. Following NSA whistleblower Edward Snowden's revelations of U.S. spying back in 2013, has it really been that long? Back in 2013, American companies lost billions of dollars as overseas clients fled from cloud services and software that they saw as compromised. A 2013 estimate by Forrester Research projected the possible losses at $180 billion by 2016 in just the field of cloud computing alone. In response, companies such as Apple and Google and Yahoo embraced encryption as a way to assure their clients that nobody, not even the government, could access their data. And that's a good thing. You have a right to privacy. If you want to read what I'm doing in my own private house, hey, get a warrant. Simple as that. Federal officials like James Comey, Homeland Security Secretary Jeh Johnson. I don't know how to pronounce his first name, by the way. J-E-H. I'm sure it's short for like Jeremiah or something, but Jew, I don't know. Jeh Johnson, I think. I'm not sure. I think, Well, anyway, NSA Director Admiral Michael Rogers have called on the tech industry to give government keys to their ciphers. Tech executives say that this would open them up to similar demands from other governments and undermine both the public perception and actual safety of their software, which is true. I think about there's the Mossad over in Israel, right? And they need private encryption standards to communicate in their investigative methods. The CIA uses encryption, I'm sure, to talk about all the different things which they do, and that's okay. But if anyone else does it, then it's suddenly not. right? I mean, it's sort of a KGB standard where it's okay when they do it, but not okay when anyone else does it, right? It's completely nonsensical. It's like genocide is okay when we do it, but not when anyone else does. It's the same sort of standard that everyone has. Every government will have that standard where they say it's okay when we do it, but not when you do it. Encryption is a fine example of that, where it's fine when the government has encryption because we need to keep our communications secure against terrorists. But if you have secure communications, you might be a terrorist. So if we are going to make a technological system that will let Comey catch the bad guy that he wants to catch, we have to let everybody who is a state actor clamp down and be able to get what they want, said John Callis, chief technologist of the encrypted communications company Silent Circle, told Christian Science Monitor's Passcode, saying there's no VIP room. It doesn't exist, said Scott Montgomery, vice president and chief technology strategist for Intel Security. If there's a backdoor, there's a backdoor for everybody. And that certainly is true. Something that has to be kept in mind, too, is it's not going to just be the United States government. I'm sure it's going to be every NATO member ever. So you can expect that Germany is going to be looking at your communications. France may be looking at your communications. Canada, your communications. All these different NATO members probably has the potential to be looking at communications. Is that really something that we want? When you look at it on its face, where they say the government needs to look at our communications just to be safe and you have nothing to hide anyway, right? That in and of itself doesn't sound so bad, even though it is on principle. But if you look at the broader spectrum, if you look at the bigger picture, it really is an atrocity. It completely undermines our privacy. And security officer at Yahoo, now chief security officer at Facebook, said it's clear that other countries would just not accept American products that have a backdoor built into them for the U.S. government, said Alex Stamos, saying there's no way they're going to be okay with that. Some of the world's foremost cryptographers, security specialists, and computer scientists from the US and UK also oppose the government's proposal. In a paper to be published on Wednesday, 13 of them argue that there's no viable technical solution that would grant governments exceptional access to encrypted data without putting it at risk. So that means then the risk is far too great to allow the government to infringe our rights in such a way. And on that note, once more, we shall look at the Fourth Amendment, which is the guideline, of course, for all these different agencies. The Fourth Amendment reads quite clearly, the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. Now, that does not sound like an encryption backdoor to me. I don't know about you. Airbus has just come out with an electric plane that successfully crossed the English Channel. And this is AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio. We are everywhere. Listen live to Hot News Talk Radio at hotnewstalkradio.com. Download the TuneIn Radio app and search for Hot News Talk Radio. Hot News Talk Radio is also on Twitter, where you report the world at sides. That's AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio. We have quite a itinerary of great sponsors here as well. You know, Bruce Krebs over at the Entrepreneur Source can get you into a franchise that's suitable to your entrepreneurial needs, your background, your interests, your capital availability, and with our local economy. That's Bruce Krebs at the Entrepreneur Source at 875-5621. That's 875-5621. And also over at Automax is a car lot where top quality used cars are sometimes $2,000 less than the other lots. Louis has an unpretentious little car lot just east of Central High School on Highway 58. He has low overhead and no staff, and he does everything himself, and then he passes the savings on to you. Everyone can get a car and rebuild credit. That's Louis over at Automax at 643-2886. At 643-2886, just ask for Louis over at Automax. Airbus has an E-fan electric plane that successfully crossed the English Channel. Now, generally speaking, planes such as this one, whether they use propeller or a jet engine, use a huge amount of fuel in order to traverse anywhere, really, in order to topographically move. Well, that is not the case with the E-fan electric airplane, which has now successfully completed its crossing of the English Channel. So this morning, Airbus E-fan electric airplane attempted to cross the English Channel, also known as La Manche in France. Liftoff is scheduled for, or was scheduled for 9:15 a.m. from Lid in Kent to Calais, I believe you say, in France. You can find some photos of the flight in a gallery, which they have at Ars Technica as well. The E-fan is designed and piloted by Didier Estaing, I think. The cruise speed is estimated at 100 miles per hour, and battery life of the E-fan is just 50 minutes. And interestingly enough, the expected duration of the flight is 45 minutes, so they have 5 minutes extra time, and it successfully crossed the English Channel. This, of course, sets a precedent for e-fan planes. Perhaps electric planes will be the way of the future in the next 20 years. We'll all be using electric planes. And if you look at how quickly aviation went, it's just so astounding how we went from the Wright brothers to jet airplanes in just the space of 50 years. Just astounding. This is Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240. We are everywhere. This is Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240, and hotnewstalkradio.com right here. Hot News Talk Radio. And you can also get us on the TuneIn app as well on Hot News Talk Radio.
This is a mob mode. This is the mob mode. What kind of fool do you think I am? You think I know nothing of
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240. Hi, this is your computer speaking. I don't feel so well. It's like I've come down with a bug, and I'm getting slower.
Affordable Computers. We fix sick computers. Your hometown guys at Affordable Computers will repair your PC in half the time of the big boys at an affordable price. No tricks, no gimmicks, no computer speak technobabble. Just good, quick, and courteous affordable service and repairs. Want to affordably supercharge your PC? Affordable Computers on Highway 58. Affordable Computers hand builds all desktops in-house. If you're looking for a better-than-new refurb laptop, $150 will get you a Dell or another name brand at Affordable Computers. Affordable Computers, Highway 58, between Arby's and Taco Bell. Also Fort O, Battlefield Parkway, near Holcomb's. Affordable Computers, we service what we sell. Call 499-1975. That's 499-1975.
Wow, this is amazing. I'm feeling great. Supercharged.
We've got a table here at Delia's in Saudi Daisy, ready to delight in a plate of authentic Mexican food. Delia's spreads a rich selection, loaded nachos, crazy chicken, homemade tamales, maybe the enchiladas with beef, chicken, pork, quesadillas, every dish beautifully pictured on the menu to help us decide. Join us for lunch or dinner. We're at Delia's in Saudi Daisy on Dayton Pike near the Thrasher Light. Here's dinner. Delia's uses the freshest ingredients, cooked to perfection. Nachos, homemade. Delia's open every day except the Lord's Day. For lunch and dinner, treat yourself to Delia's genuine Mexican food. In Saudi, call 521-7145. That's 521-7145.
Do you feel better outside your home or business than in? Indoor air quality is important. Mildew, mold, smoke, water, and rodent damage are prime causes of poor indoor air quality. Ducts Indoor Air Professionals, better known as Duct Busters, cleans HVAC systems using 127 definable Duct Busters steps. Let Mark Thompson address the indoor air quality at your business to help reduce employee illnesses. Prevent fires by cleaning your dryer vents. Mark and his parents, Dick and Joan Thompson, have been building our local economy and helping local people with HVAC systems 16 years. Ducts Indoor Air Professionals. Call 876-9907. 876-9907. Ducks. Call now.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
You love your hometown. Are you interested in free markets, in local economy? Do you hope that Chattanooga can survive the next meltdown, the next chain of disasters in the national economy? What's the best way to live out the ideals of self-government and self-determination? Join me, David Toulis, weekdays 1 to 3.
Hot News Talk 1240.
Love your neighbor, buy local.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
Hot News Talk 1240.
Fox News Radio, I'm Lillian Wu. A milestone at the South Carolina State House as a controversial flag is removed.
The South Carolina Highway Patrol Honor Guard in full dress, complete with campaign hats, marched proudly and deliberately before gently lowering that Confederate battle flag, pulling it taut and folding it reverently. The thousands gathered outside the State House. They kept the peace. Some in the crowd were waving Confederate flags of varying sizes.
Fox Radio's Evan Brown, the winners of the Women's World Cup, cheered in New York City. The team riding on float through the Canyon of Heroes parade route, the first women to enjoy such an honor in 3 decades. And legendary actor Omar Sharif has died. The Egyptian-born Sharif, best known for movies Lawrence of Arabia and Dr. Zhivago. He was 83. Fox News, we report, you decide.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
Oh man, I'm looking at the I'm looking at the news now, and it's just sometimes it just makes you want to jump out of a window, man. Sometimes you look at the news and it's just the headlines are so stupid that you just who cares, man? Like people are talking about right now, actually in the headlines. There's this thing about the different celebrities, and you're just like, man, who cares? Like this is really what people care about because people share it on Facebook, right? Like you go on Facebook and you see what people share, and it's just like, veteran went to buy a gay wedding cake and the Muslim baker denied him. You won't believe what happened next. It's like, man, who cares? Like big deal, right? Like there's actually somebody out there who just like cares about this stuff and shares it all the time. It's like, man, nobody cares. It's not a big deal, right? Like, a business decided to make a business decision. You won't believe what happened next. Or like a glitch in a system at the federal government. You won't believe what happened next. It's like, wow. Guess what? That happens all the dang time. Well, speaking of glitches in federal systems, the OPM, which is the Office of Something Management, Personnel Management, sorry, I lost the word in my head, is calling it a data rupture now, a hack hitting the OPM, affecting 21.5 million people. Last year's massive hack of the U.S. Office of Personnel Management security clearance system, according to Ars Technica, affected 21.5 million people, including 1.8 million people who didn't even apply for a background investigation, officials said on Thursday, making it officially the breach of the worst breach in U.S. history. The new figure includes most, if not all, of the 4.2 million people the agency previously said were exposed in a separate breach of personnel files. The much larger number resulted from the hack in June or July of last year on the system used to conduct background checks on contractors and other private sector employees, as well as federal workers. Some 1.1 million people who had the stolen records included applicants' fingerprints. Background checks for people applying with the Central Intelligence Agency were not affected because that agency conducts its own security clearance investigations. Oh, well. That's kind of the holy grail, actually, of hacks, is the names and locations of CIA operatives. So if you can get that, hey, major props, because that's the holy grail. So if that can be obtained, I'd be highly interested in reading that. But anyway, if you underwent a background investigation through OPM, Office of Personnel Management, in 2000 or afterwards, which occurs through the submission of forms SF86, SF85, or SF85P for either a new investigation or a reinvestigation, it's highly likely that you were impacted by the incident involving background investigations. OPM officials warned in an update that was published on Thursday, saying if you underwent a background investigation prior to 2000, you still may be impacted, but it's less likely. So, gee, thanks. Now, I've never gone through a background check, but this still might have affected some of us in ways that you might not think of. Now, I haven't undergone a background check recently, as in I've never had a background check, but I kind of have to later. Here's why. Here in the States, there's a thing called the C&R ATF license, which allows you to get guns shipped to your door. Now, here in the States, you can't get guns just shipped to your door if you're a regular person. It's stupid, but you can't. I don't know why. I mean, yeah, it's a security thing, but as it is now, if you want to buy a gun from a private individual and have it shipped to you, or from a dealer and have it shipped to you, you have to have it shipped to what's called an FFL, which is a federal firearms license holder, before it can be shipped to you. Now, any gun store is going to be an FFL holder, so that's not really a big deal. I have one like 3 seconds from my house, so that's not a big deal. The problem is you have to pay a transfer fee. Usually, some of them don't actually have one, but most of them do. It's like $20, $5, depending on where you go. So that's kind of a problem. Now, I like old guns. I like not really ancient, not like, I'm not sure what the word would be, but I like older guns. Guns that are 50 years old or older, essentially. And there's what's called a CNR list, which is curios and relics, which you can get, again, from the ATF. Now, all you need to get that is, here's the kick, a background check and proof that you're not a felon, basically. And I think LEO has to sign off on it. That's law enforcement officer, I think, has to sign off on it, although that may not be true. It depends, because there's sort of varying claims about that. Like some say you have to notify, some say you have to get a direct letter back from your chief LEO, which would be your sheriff in this particular instance. So I don't know. Where I live, the sheriff, I'm sure, would be cool with it, because I know that I have met, anyway, the sheriff, and he's a cool guy. Not my favorite, but he's a cool guy. And so it wouldn't be a problem. But again, you have to get a background check. So things that you might not even think of where you get background checks, you may have had your information stolen. I mean, my dad was in the CAP as a leader or some sort, like a senior officer. I don't remember what it was. I didn't like CAP, but he was in the Civil Air Patrol, and you had to get a background check in order to be an adult in any sort of leadership position within the CAP. So my dad may have had his information taken. I don't know. Just different things like that. You might not even think of having had a background check. Your information may have been stolen. Now, I have less sympathy for people who, of course, work for the feds, where it's like, yeah, I'm an employee of the FBI. It's like, well, okay, fine. You had your information stolen. Deal with it. I have a little bit less sympathy for people such as those, maybe because I'm extremely biased, but that's just me. I don't like feds of any sort, in case you couldn't tell. So I have a little bit less sympathy, but maybe I should be a little bit more gracious towards them, but that's not likely. So the claim is that if you underwent a background investigation through the Office of Personnel Management in 2000 or afterwards, which occurs through those different forms, either a new investigation or a reinvestigation, it's highly likely that you are impacted by the incident involving background investigations. OPM officials warned in an update published on Thursday, saying if you underwent a background investigation prior to 2000, you still may be impacted, but it's less likely. The details on the background investigation forms are a data bonanza for hackers. They include social security numbers, residences, mental health histories, and other highly personal details, not only for applicants, but also for applicants' family members. National security experts have warned that the data can be mined to identify U.S. intelligence operatives as well, which I don't really see as a big deal, but others do. The Senate Intelligence Committee hearing on Wednesday, FBI Director James Comey said that he and his family were personally affected by the breach. Washington Post and other publications reported as well. In fact, I've actually seen just recently on the deep web, I don't know I don't know the voraciousness of these claims, but I saw names and addresses and sometimes phone numbers of different federal employees in higher up manner. I mean, Leon Panetta was one of them. Apparently he lives in California. I didn't know that. So different people were affected by that. I don't know if that came out of this massive breach, but it was still interesting that somebody has even alleged documents about these different people and their different addresses. It's really interesting. But again, sometimes addresses are a matter of public record, if you're in the phone book, for instance. So it's hard to tell, but it was interesting anyway. So I'm sure the adversary has my SF86 now, he said, referring to the standard Form 86 that applicants for security clearances fill out, according to the Washington Post. He said that the form listed every place I've lived since I was 18, every foreign trip I've taken, all my family and their addresses. I've got siblings, I got 5 kids, all of that is in there, he said. The lapses that led to the OPM hack are breathtaking. As ours recently chronicled in different articles, the magnitude of those shortcomings are outdone only by the significance of the loss, not only to the U.S. national security, but also to the individual applicants and their families. So there also are, of course, implications for people who are not directly agents of the feds, right? I mean, family members, places you visited. Really, it shouldn't be the government's business about any of that sort of thing. Like, why do they care? But again, it's the federal government. What do you expect? Of course, they're going to overreach their bounds, right? Of course, they're going to be overzealous in their methods through which they find out about different people who sign up. Of course, they're going to be rather bad about keeping their information secure as well. So that's something that has to be kept in mind, is that the feds are not very good at security. It's kind of funny, actually. Even their own security, they're actually kind of bad at that sort of thing. They're actually extremely bad at security. I mean, look at Edward Snowden. Look at what happened with that. Look at Julian Assange and Bradley Manning and all the different stuff that happened with that. And, Chelsea Manning now. All the different stuff that happened with that. It's just like they're bad at security over there. They're extremely bad. They claim that we're the most secure place ever, but there's no such thing as complete security. There can't be. So it's further exemplified by the very poor security which the federal government displays. Well, the Apple Watch has been kind of a flop, and it's not really a surprise because who wants one? That's the thing about the Apple Watch. I didn't understand why it came out, because my first thought when I saw it was, who wants one, really? Smartwatches are not something that really interests me, not at least in a serious way. The Pebble kind of seemed cool to me, but I couldn't think of any way I would really use it. So smartwatches seem kind of useless to me, honestly. Well, the Apple Watch might be flopping, according to a report. Apple has been on a roll for the last decade or so. Everything which it releases seems to be a smash hit, even when the initial reaction is kind of pessimistic. Nobody talks about the iPad having a goofy name or the iPhone getting all fingerprinty anymore. These products change the market for personal computing, according to Extreme Tech. But what about the Apple Watch? Well, data collected by Slice Intelligence shows that Apple Watch sales are dropping off a cliff. Could this be an old-fashioned Apple flop in the making? Now, flops for Apple are not anything new. If you remember the Newton, if you're old enough for that, you remember what a flop looks like. If you remember the Apple, what was it? The Millennium Edition Apple that they came out with is not Millennium Edition. It was like the Windows, not Windows. It was like the Apple 2K, and it looked really dumb. And it was just like, it was just bad. It was underpowered. It was just and it's been used in different works of fiction because it kind of looked cool, but it wasn't very practical. Remember the Apple CD player, which was also a massive flop. Remember the iTunes phone, which was a massive flop because nobody cared about it. So Apple is not immune to failures, and it seems that the Apple Watch might be another one, although we don't know because market trends are weird. Apple tends not to release sales figures on its products, and when it does, they're very positive general figures on flashy keynote slides saying, we raised our sales 20% in the last 2 years. It's like, hey, cool. The numbers from Slice are, of course, unofficial, but based on real data collected from users. And Slice Intelligence produces a popular app called Slice, which can scan your email for shipping and tracking information, which I don't trust really, but if you want to, hey, it uses this to keep you updated on where your packages are. The app is free, but by using it, you agree to let Slice collect and aggregate data on what you're buying, which doesn't sound too cool to me. Based on that data, though, Slice says that Apple Watch sales figures fell significantly after the initial rush, more than 90% from peak. Most days, Apple is moving under 20,000 Apple Watches, which are very low volume even for an Apple product. In recent days, the numbers are even lower, under 10,000 units. Overall sales are probably in the neighborhood of 1.5 million watches, which sounds pretty high, but considering Apple's market, really it's not. And it's one of those things where you kind of look at it and you say, why really are they bothering with this? You know, who thought this was a good idea? It makes you wonder, you know, if Steve Jobs are still around, you know, rest his soul and everything. It makes you wonder if Steve Jobs are still around, would the Apple Watch have ever come about? You know, was Steve Jobs briefed on the Apple Watch? Did he think it was a good idea or what? Because Steve Jobs, for all his eccentricities, sometimes he seemed to actually know what the market wanted. So I don't know. I mean, there's stories about him with the iPhone dropping it in fish tanks, and if bubbles came out, he said it wasn't good enough. I don't know if those are substantiated claims, but it seems like the guy knew what he was talking about with a lot of different things. And I wonder if he would have let the Apple Watch fly as it came out. Perhaps more troubling for Apple, consumers aren't going for the pricey upgrades. About 2/3 of all Apple Watch sales are for the cheapest sport variant, which starts at, get this, $349 for the smartwatch. You know, maybe that's another reason the iWatch, or rather Apple Watch, is not selling too well. It's really dang expensive. So I don't know. Market trends are kind of a weird thing. And maybe the Apple Watch will pick up with sales after prices go down. If prices go down, we'll have to wait and see. But as it is now, I don't have any interest in one. I don't really know anyone who has an interest in one. So we'll just have to wait and see how market trends continue. But as it is right now, I'm not an Apple fan anyway, so I may be a little bit biased. I know I'm a little bit biased about it, but it doesn't seem like a very interesting product to me. And funnily enough, I was actually more interested in the Pebble because the price was low and the hackability was there. So we'll just have to wait and see how how market trends continue. But as it is now, no Apple products for me, thanks. Although I hear good things about the new iPhone, I don't know. It's just not for me. Well, to display the fickleness of the internet and the connectivity regarding that, it seems that a broken cable reportedly disconnected a U.S. island territory from the internet. So the Northern Mariana Islands rely on a single undersea fiber cable, which then broke. And that's the funny thing is different islands such as those are completely reliant on undersea fiber cables like those to keep them connected. Like we're completely reliant on undersea cables to keep us connected to other regions across the world, like, you know, Russia, China, all those different regions, I should say. We're reliant on undersea fiber optic cables to keep us connected. So if those undersea fiber optic cables happen to break or, I don't know, erode away or something like that, then we run into problems. Well, an undersea fiber optic cable that supplies internet connectivity to the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands was reportedly cut more than 48 hours ago, taking tens of thousands of people offline. Access is being gradually restored to the U.S. territory located north of Guam in the Western Pacific Island. Now, something that has to keep in mind is kept in mind as well is that this could happen to any of us at really any time. We're sort of reliant on maintenance of these lines to ensure that this does not happen. But also, if, say, our fiber lines got cut, it's not like all of the internet would suddenly go away for us, because we have different servers and things that are here, held domestically in the States. So it's not like all of the internet ever would just go away, because that's not really how it works. But what would happen is you would see a lot of different websites suddenly going offline, say websites that are housed overseas. As an example, mega.co.uk, or sorry, mega.co.nz is in New Zealand. And so that being the case, we would no longer have access to that, which means that I wouldn't have access to a lot of my files, which I hold in the cloud on mega.co.nz. So that would be a mega problem for me, actually. Well, IT&E, which is the primary telecommunications provider, said yesterday that in the next 2 to 3 days, we'll be able to provide a better timeline for the full restoration of services. While IT&E attempts to fix the undersea cable, it has partially restored service by reviving an old microwave link, which I guarantee you is pretty dang slow. The Pacific Daily News, which is a newspaper over in Guam, which again is the United States territory, says a break-in an undersea cable has disconnected the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands phone, internet, banking, and other communications with Guam and the rest of the world. The outage also means credit card purchases, withdrawing money from ATMs, teleconferencing for healthcare, and all other communications that go through the CNMI's only fiber optic cable connection to the outside world have gone dark. Telecommunications company IT&E confirmed Wednesday afternoon. So this means then that for a very short period of time, actually, the Northern Mariana Islands had to rely on local economy for a very short period of time, which is, I know, terrible and rather a drastic move, and not something that anyone ever has to deal with, but that's what they had to do. So it's kind of interesting to see that happen. I wonder what the results of that were. You know, we don't have any internet access. What do we do now? Now, fortunately, we probably wouldn't have that problem here in the States, simply because we have access to local servers. I mean, there are actually even servers that are held here, as in like locally here in the Chattanooga area. So it's not like we would see a sudden loss of communications with everyone ever. So we would still have access to different websites and such all around the world. And actually all around the United States, not necessarily the world. In 1997, the company invested $14 million to lay an undersea fiber optic cable that links CNMI and Guam, and from Guam to an undersea cable across the Pacific, the report said, calling it the lone undersea cable linking CNMI to the rest of the world. And CNMI previously relied on the microwave link, which, again, nobody wants to have to do, because as somebody who has helped to install a microwave satellite dish, these things are extremely fragile, and one move 1/8 of an inch to the right or left means that you no longer have communications, and it's really, really obnoxious. The FCC is currently disagreeing, or rather members of the FCC are currently disagreeing on whether internet access is actually a necessity, which of course the people in the North Mariana Islands are discovering right now, whether or not it's a necessity. The Federal Communications Commission member Michael O'Reilly argued last month that internet access is not a necessity or a human right. Fellow Commissioner Mignon Clyburn took notice. In a speech at a policy conference yesterday, she listed numerous reasons why internet access actually is necessary in the modern age, and there's different reasons you can read on Ars Technica, but I kind of agree in some ways. I agree that it's a human right for you to purchase access to the internet, but access to the internet in the same way that access to food is necessary, I don't think that that is the case. You certainly have a right to gather food under, of course, common law, and somewhat constitutionally, you have a right to get food, right? But you don't necessarily have a right to access the internet in the same way that they may be describing here. The way internet access is being described here is a little bit different from how I view it. You see, you have a right to purchase internet access, and nobody should be able to take that down, especially not a Fed. But I don't think that the internet should be provided to you from the federal government, because on the one hand, you probably have a censored internet in that case, and on the other hand, it's probably not going to be optimal internet access in that case either. So this could be seen as just a debate over semantics, and O'Reilly doesn't argue that internet access is unimportant. Rather, he says the word necessity should be reserved to those items that humans cannot live without, such as food, shelter, and water. To which I actually kind of agree, because again, internet access is not something which you actually need in order to exist. Things which you need in order to exist, you certainly have a right to, and some of us don't really need access to the internet in order to exist, although it certainly does feel like it sometimes. Clyburn pointed out that the FCC is required to make sure everyone in the U.S. has affordable broadband access. And not only is the internet a necessity today, but Congress actually directed the FCC to ensure that everyone, regardless of income, has access to advanced communications services, she said. But also, we should keep in mind that it's also been directed to make sure that we all have affordable healthcare systems, and that's not really working out too well either. So it's internet being affordable. That's a little bit questionable. Of course, we can all access the internet from, say, a public library or from Starbucks or from wherever. So it's not like there's any sort of shortage of internet. It's just that making sure that the government provides us with internet, or the government makes sure we all have access to internet. I'm not sure if I really want that, actually, because I very much doubt I would be provided with the best possible internet if it's up to the government to provide it. Just saying. FBI claims that it's thwarting, or rather has thwarted, ISIS-inspired July 4th attacks. Well, those claims are questionable because they've sort of backpedaled a little bit over at the FBI. First, we heard, well, the FBI stopped a major threat, and then the FBI may have stopped a major threat, and then the FBI thinks it may have possibly at some point looked at a major threat, although it never actually was carried out. FBI Director James Comey said on Thursday that U.S. officials were able to stop terrorist attacks that were inspired by the Islamic State and planned for the 4th of July holiday weekend, although few details were given about the plots, and that's probably because it didn't actually happen. Notice they say ISIS-inspired. They don't just say ISIS attacks, because saying that ISIS attacks occurred in the United States or were attempted to be perpetrated in the United States would mean kind of a panic. And that's not really anything that anyone wants, especially with the market being the way that it is right now. Or rather, I should say, the stock market being the way that it is right now. Local economy is fine right now. I haven't noticed any changes at all. I can still go and buy stuff from Delia's. I can still, I'm sure, go and buy a car from Automax. No problems there. I can still get my phone repaired at Quick Search. Again, no problems there. But trying to get something done in the national level, it's a little bit harder, actually, nowadays. It's actually easier now to work in local economy than it is in national economy, which I don't see as necessarily a bad thing. Others might, because we're all kind of addicted to McDonald's and Walmart, but I'm not really, because I haven't gone to McDonald's in I don't know how long. I only went to Walmart one time because I kind of had to. So speaking with reporters at FBI headquarters in Washington, D.C., Comey attributed the lack of terror attacks to a string of arrests that local and government officials made in the weeks preceding Independence Day, so-called. Nearly a dozen people were arrested across the U.S. for allegedly trying to provide material support to the Islamic State or preparing to carry out deadly attacks inspired by the extremist group. Now, trying to provide material aid to the Islamic State is actually not anything new. Lots of people have tried to do that, and so they don't really seem to have any sort of substantial claims that really a terrorist attack was definitely going to happen on July the 4th. They don't have any substantiated claims for that. So keep that in mind when you keep seeing that in the news. There's no definitive proof. They may do scare tactics and all that sort of thing, but really there's not any real proof that anything happened other than woulda, coulda, shoulda, or maybe possibly kind of. This is Digital Drive. I'm your host, Russell. We're talking about technology and quite a bit more. And Nuganomics.com with David Toulis is coming up in just a few seconds right here on News Talk Radio, AM 1240 and HotNewsTalkRadio.com.
This is a mob mode. This is the mob mode. What kind of fool do you think I am? You think I know nothing about
Arnie Guest Goldsmith, Chattanooga's gold standard in quality, selection, and beautifully handcrafted jewelry. Arnie Guest Goldsmith has 7 jewelers on site and ready to assist you in the design of your one-of-a-kind diamond piece. Arnie Guest Goldsmith, Chattanooga's gold standard in quality, selection, and beautifully handcrafted jewelry. Arnie Guest Goldsmith has 7 jewelers on site and ready to assist